see what the Bible really says about cremation and why this topic, which for centuries seemed so distant from Christian families, has now become an inevitable part of our conversations. Never before have so many people thought about this with such seriousness. And this happens because we are living through a historical and cultural shift much greater than we perceive at first glance. In several countries, cremation has already surpassed traditional burial as the most chosen method, and this pattern is spreading silently and steadily. This phenomenon raises countless social, emotional, practical, and spiritual questions, and forces many Christian families to reflect on something that once seemed distant. And if the projections continue as they are, more and more Christian families will face this difficult and delicate decision. But the big question arises, does cremation interfere with the resurrection? If I am cremated, can God still resurrect me? And what does the Bible say, in a clear, honest, and complete way, about what happens to the body after death? These questions touch the heart, the mind, and the faith, especially when we think about eternity and the power of God. Before any quick conclusion, I want you to stay with me until the end, because this subject is deep, full of nuances, and filled with details that almost no one explains properly. The truth is that many people simply repeat opinions without actually studying, and this creates unnecessary fear. Understanding this can bring peace, hope, and clarity to you and your family, because decisions about death are difficult, but they become much lighter when accompanied by knowledge. So I begin by asking you, would you authorize your own cremation? Yes or no? And more, would you authorize the cremation of someone you love deeply? Think about this as we delve into everything here, because this reflection will accompany you throughout the entire video and may even change something inside you. And of course, if this content helps you at any moment, remember to click the like button, because that helps the channel immensely to bring this kind of serious study to more people. To begin with understanding and not just opinions, we need to carefully explain how cremation really works, because many people imagine mistaken things, others imagine fantastical things, and some even imagine disturbing things simply due to lack of information. Lack of knowledge creates fear, and fear creates prejudice. But the reality is very different from what is imagined, and understanding this process helps remove a lot of unnecessary apprehension and helps treat death with more serenity. Modern cremation is a technical, controlled procedure and much more respectful than many people think, conducted with strict protocols and very high standards. First, the body is prepared in a way similar to what happens before traditional burial. Metal objects such as jewelry, prosthetics, and accessories are removed because they cannot go into furnace and because they may compromise the procedure. After that, the body is placed inside a simple coffin or a special container made to withstand extremely high temperatures. Then begins a part that most surprises those who have never researched this. The furnace reaches temperatures that generally range from 1,600 to 1,800 degrees Celsius. Contrary to what many think, the body does not burn like wood. It does not catch fire instantly. The process is more scientific and progressive. The skin, muscles, and tissues dry out and evaporate gradually, and this takes time, usually from an hour and a half to 3 hours, depending on the body's weight. The furnace's technology, the level of humidity, the ventilation, and the funeral home's protocols. It is an impressive process, but extremely controlled, discreet, and carried out in an environment fully prepared for it. What remains are not ashes like from a common fire. What remains are resistant bone fragments that stay intact even after high temperatures. These fragments go through a machine called a cremulator, a machine that carefully grinds the bones until they become a fine, light powder, what we commonly know as ashes. They have no smell, contain no carbon, and contain no recognizable biological remains. They are, technically, pulverized minerals. This is important because it breaks many myths about cremation. After this, the family decides whether to bury, keep, place in a columbarium, or even scatter the ashes in a meaningful place, if allowed by law. In some countries, this carries strong symbolism, returning what once was a body to the cycle of nature as a return creation. In other cultures, Keeping the ashes has become a way of keeping the memory alive and allowing more sensitive farewells without the need for a traditional burial. All of this shows that cremation is far less aggressive and much more symbolic and respectful than many imagine. And this matters greatly when we talk about faith. But before we talk about theology, there is something very interesting about the history of cremation. Many people believe that it is a modern invention, but that is not true. Archaeological records show that ancient peoples, such as Greeks, Romans, and various Eastern cultures, used cremation as a common practice, for reasons that range from public hygiene to philosophical beliefs about the soul. For some people, burning the body meant freeing the spirit from matter. For others, it was a way to prevent the body from being desecrated or violated by enemies. In certain civilizations, cremation was seen as a rite of passage, a symbol of crossing between worlds. For centuries, in certain cultures, cremating had no negative connotation. On the contrary, it was considered an honor. Israel, on the other hand, favored burial, not because it rejected cremation as sin, but because of deep cultural roots, family traditions, tribal bonds, and symbolism tied to the land, ancestry, and the promise of God. The family tomb represented belonging, continuity, and memory. Today, for completely different reasons, lack of space, cost, sustainability, urban mobility, cultural changes, and even the influence of global trends, cremation has once again been seen as a legitimate and often necessary alternative. Now that you better understand the process and the historical context, we can look at the most important point: what the Bible really says about the destiny of the body after death. Talking about this requires sensitivity, because we are dealing with grief, faith, vulnerability, memory, and hope. The Bible does not bring any commandment forbidding or ordering cremation. What it brings are accounts of practices and spiritual principles about death, dignity, and resurrection. The most common examples are burials, such as that of Sarah in Genesis 23, in which Abraham buys a cave to bury her, a gesture of honor, love, commitment, memory, and respect. Joseph is also embalmed and taken to the ancestral tomb, something that symbolizes his identity and his faith in the promise of the land. These episodes show culture, not divine imposition. They reveal how families lived, not a universal rule that applies to all times and places. On the other hand, the Bible records cases in which bodies were burned, usually out of necessity, as in 1 Samuel 31. When the bodies of Saul and his sons were mutilated after the battle and were cremated by the men of Jabesh. The intention there was not dishonor. On the contrary, it was protection, respect, and mercy in the face of tragic circumstances. In extreme situations, when the body was deformed, putrefied, mutilated, or exposed, cremation was a gesture of dignity, not a contempt. There are also texts in which fire is related to divine judgment, but these are specific cases, linked to sin and punishment and not to modern cremation. Fire appears as a symbol in dozens of different contexts: purification, divine presence, direction of the spirit, judgment, and holiness. Mixing all of this to create a universal rule about cremation is an interpretative mistake that ignores context, culture, and the original purpose of the text. What really matters theologically is the resurrection. And here, yes, the Bible is very clear. The most important place about this is 1 Corinthians chapter 15. There, Paul says that the body that dies is like a seed cast into the ground, and a seed, before becoming a plant, loses its original form. The current body is mortal, corruptible, and limited. The resurrected body will be incorruptible, glorious, and spiritual. In other words, the body that God will give you does not depend on the integrity of the body you had here. God does not need to recover every original molecule. He does not depend on the physical state of matter. The resurrection is a work of the Spirit, not a biological process of reassembly. Furthermore, Paul speaks categorically. We will all be transformed. And this transformation does not depend on the physical state of the body at the moment of death. Nothing in the text suggests limitation, doubt, or conditioning. The emphasis is on the absolute power of God. When John describes Jesus calling Lazarus out of the tomb, in John chapter 11, the message is not preservation, but power. Lazarus already smelled bad, was already in advanced decomposition, and even so, Jesus commanded life. The same applies to people who died in fires, drownings, wars, catastrophes, natural disasters, or who simply decompose over decades or centuries. There is no difficulty for God in this. He creates out of nothing. He restores the dust. He revives dry bones, as in Ezekiel chapter 37. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 says that the dead in Christ will rise first. There is no condition whatsoever about burial, bodily integrity, or funeral method. The only condition is being in Christ. That is what guarantees the hope of resurrection, not the way the body returned to dust. With this in mind, practical questions arise. How should a Christian decide? Where to begin? First, with conscience. The Bible deeply values the motivation of the heart. If burial brings you peace, if the symbolism of the grave is important for your faith, then keep that practice. But if cremation for practical, financial, cultural, environmental, or logistical reasons makes more sense for you and your family, that does not diminish your faith. The most important thing is that the decision is made with respect, dignity, and spiritual serenity. Second, talk with your family. Nothing causes more conflict and grief than decisions that were never discussed. Being clear about your wishes avoids arguments, hurt, and misunderstandings, and allows those who remain to honor your memory with peace. Third, think about the emotional impact. Some people find comfort in visiting a grave. Others find it more meaningful to have the ashes in a special place. Others prefer to return everything to nature. All these choices can express faith as long as they are made with respect. Fourth, consider the practical side. Costs, legislation, columbariums, cemeteries, urban mobility, and planning. Avoiding surprises helps both emotionally and financially and spares your family from difficult decisions in a sensitive moment. Finally, remember, the Bible does not forbid cremation. It does not say that cremation prevents resurrection. The Christian faith is based on the power of God, not on the integrity of our remains. God does not depend on ashes, bones, or molecules. Resurrection is a promise, and He is faithful. Therefore, make your decision with freedom, responsibility, and hope. May your life and your death bear witness to your faith in the God who transforms, restores, and resurrects. And remember, peace and decision comes when we understand that God is not limited by human circumstances. He is sovereign over life, over death, and over eternity. If this video helped you, leave your opinion in the comments with respect and love. And if you can, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. This helps the channel a lot and allows this reflection to reach more people. Thank you for being here, and may God illuminate your decisions and accompany you in every step of your journey.